Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and today I'm here to film one of my favorite videos that I do each year, and that is a countdown of the 10 best books that I read in 2019. These books did not necessarily have to be published in 2019, but I read them all this year in 2019, and this is going to be the last video on our channel for the year, and also for the decade, the 2010s decade. So, without further ado, let's start the countdown. And funny enough, number 10 on the list last year was a book about Dwight D. Eisenhower. That one was Becoming Leader of the Free World. Number 10 this year is The Age of Eisenhower: America and the World in the 1950s by William I. Hitchcock. And this one was published last year. This was the Best Presidential Bios site led me to this. And what I liked about this book is that it went all in on a particular president in a particular area. This wasn't a general biography, but it told me enough of what I needed to know about Eisenhower. This is more for advanced enthusiasts for U.S. presidents, but I got everything that I needed to know about what led up to Eisenhower's presidential administration and the actions, choices, and emotions that took place within his administration through this book. And I really got a great sense of Eisenhower as a president, as a person, and the time period that was the 1950s. This has been a year of me reading more plays, and I want to read even more plays in the years to come. This is the first of two, and this is one that we went over on our channel back in Season 9. But number 9 on this list is The Visit, a tragicomedy by Friedrich Dürrenmatt. He is a Swiss playwright and writer, and this play really does a brilliant job examining society, humanity, and the way that people respond to a certain situation, and also the destruction of what one may see as a respectable person. This play was The Visit was so clever, and it really is timeless. It could be applied to today's individuals' issues and the way that people respond to them. This also includes political influence and the way that the media sees things and what they crave. Dürrenmatt was just brilliant, and I'm so happy that I got the opportunity to read The Visit, and I want to read more from him in the years to come. And this particular collection was translated into English by Joel Agee, or Agee. Number 8 on my list is Dr. Mutter's Marvels by Kristen O'Keefe Aptowitz. And I went to the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia back in 2005 and 2006 on 2 separate occasions. And during that time period, the only exhibit that really interested me was the When the President is the Patient exhibit, which included the piece from Grover Cleveland's Jaw and a piece of Charles Guiteau's Brain. But with that in mind, and with the museum in mind, I had this idea that Dr. Mutter was an eccentric who collected surgical souvenirs and abnormalities. But I learned so much about who Dr. Mutter was as a person and the compassion of his that served as a great influence in modern-day medicine. This is where we started seeing transitions regarding medical practices and things that were beginning to set themselves up for greater advancement within the world of medicine. I think that we learned so much about the world of medicine, but how Dr. Mutter was an important factor, not just in his own procedures, but the way that he influenced other people. So, this is a biography about Dr. Mutter, and I learned more about him, even though his background is very vague, but I think this book is definitely worth checking out. I think it's mandatory for people that are looking to get into medicine, but I strongly think that anybody that wants to learn about 19th century medicine in America and essentially across the globe should check this one out. Number 7, I picked American Sniper, which is the autobiography of Chris Kyle, and there are contributions from Jim DeFelice and Scott McEwen. And this has to do with a Navy SEAL and the most lethal sniper in American military history, Chris Kyle, and how he served in the U.S. military in the Middle East. Chris Kyle is just straightforward with every particular detail. You get as great a sense as somebody who has not participated in the military can possibly get. I think that Chris Kyle does an extraordinary job being right to the point and telling us what we need to know and how we need to know what being in the military really means. For number 6, I picked Love the Fur You're In, Monster Wit and Wisdom from Sesame Street, and this was a collection put together by various illustrators and features illustrations from various books that Sesame Street came out with featuring the Sesame Street characters. And there are particular phrases, some of them typical, like find someone who can dance to your tune, and then some that are particularly Sesame Street inspired, but yet catch up to the ordinary points, like snuggle up with a snuffleupagus, which can be construed as you wish. But my favorite one has to be done is better than perfect. And then, of course, there's no such thing as too many books, which is mentioned in here. Yeah, right here. And funny enough, Fahrenheit 451 is right on the top, and that's one of my favorites. It was released as part of the 50th anniversary celebration, and a great way to celebrate. And the top 6 books on this list all got 5 stars. I rated 5 books 4.5, but 4 of the 5 made it to the top 10. Number 5 is They Call This Enemy by George Takei, and this was written with assistance by Justin Essinger, Stephen Scott, and the art was by Harmony Becker. And They Call This Enemy is George Takei's memoir about growing up as a very young kid in the Japanese internment camps during World War II. And in this book, we get a greater understanding about the Japanese American citizens being held in these internment camps, and how unconstitutional it was, but yet it happened, and George Takei still sees that America is somewhere that one can speak up about this concern and be able to move on from it. And George Takei really made something out of himself. He played a key role in the Star Trek series, and then went on to become a very strong voice for both Asian issues and also LGBTQ+ issues. And George Takei is just such a witty and clever and an individual with a great sense of humor. And I think that this book really capitalizes and clarifies why George Takei is the legend that he is. Number 4 on my list is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. This is my 3rd time reading it. I read it once for British Literature 2. I read it once for Irish Literature, and I read it again for Literary Gladiators. The discussion is going to be coming up in the new year, in January. But what I really like about The Importance of Being Earnest is that it is so absurd in the way that it is clever and trivial in how it displays the Victorian upper class of the late 19th century. And it really touches upon what people do when they have the money and the wealth to not have to worry about crucial things. And Oscar Wilde was an extraordinary man, and the characters of Jack and Algernon, and how they're more concerned about being someone that they are not just to impress a girl, and how these girls are very much insist on their own angel food cake desires. It's just, I think that this is one of my favorite plays that I've ever read. And it just intrigues me to read more of what Oscar Wilde has written. This is the 2nd of the 2 plays on this list. Number 3 on my list is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, and this is illustrated by Quentin Blake. Many of us are familiar with the 1970s film adaptation, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It was also adapted into a 2005 film with Johnny Depp, but this is the original book, and this really is an extraordinary piece. Is so ridiculous, but yet it is so moralistic, where it certainly gets under your skin, and it's definitely something that you're not going to forget. There are just parts of this that I really love. How Roald Dahl harps on what it means to love books and reading, and what it means to be a selfless person no matter what age you are. And he also harps on the fact that cereal is nothing more than a box of wood shavings. Number 2 on my list is The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende, this version translated into English by Ralph Manheim. And The Never-Ending Story, there are so many incredible things that I can say about this, but this work of fantasy really does everything that this has everything that a reader is looking for in a book. It is engaging, and this is a book for the reader and their response to the written work. And in this case, Bastian Balthasar Bucks is an important piece to this never-ending story, and there's a response, and he becomes even more involved within the piece until he enters their world. But this book is more than, this book is not an ordinary adventure that you see in many of fantasy flicks in the box office. This is an epiphany. This is one's realization of what are meaningful values in life. And there are moments where this book breaks tradition, but I think that ultimately there is something about this that really sticks with you. I started reading this back in 2005, and I decided I would return to this and propose it for a discussion on our channel, and I'm so glad that I did so, and now it's one of my all-time favorites. And now for the number 1 book, the best book that I read in 2019, is from an author that I've been looking to read for quite some time. I've read one of his short stories, but I finally got the opportunity to read one of his books, and number 1 goes to Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Robert McCammon is often classified as a horror fiction writer, and he's often seen in the league of Stephen King and Dean Koontz, even though McCammon is not as well known, but his quality is amazing. This is a coming-of-age piece, but it is so much more than that. I was so immersed in this book. I finished this in a few days. I devoted much of my vacation from work reading this book, and I'm so glad that I did so. I was living in Corey Mackinson's world. In this case, Corey Mackinson lives in Alabama with a modest family. His dad is a milkman during a time of transition where the supermarkets are becoming much more prosperous and the milkmen are becoming more superfluous. But this is somewhat parallel to McCammon's own life. The only difference being that McCammon's parents were more, they were involved in the entertainment industry and they were a bit more well-to-do. But what is amazing about this book is, one, there are so many fantastical elements, but all of them can be tied to a sense of reality. Number two, every character within this piece is one that you can admire, despise, or have some kind of emotion. Nobody in this book is wasted in the way that they are not necessary. Everybody in this book is necessary in some way, shape, or form. And one of the very best things about this book is that it just like the Never-Ending Story, it breaks tradition as far as sequence is concerned. Not every issue, not every antagonizing issue is pushed to the end of the book. There are issues that are resolved. They're resolved when they're resolved. It's very reminiscent to the way that life works. It is probably the most accurate as far as a book taking on that life sequence is concerned. But at the same time, there is as much closure as one can give. But following that sequence that I mentioned, that's the premise of this book. I think that somebody said that Boy's Life was Robert McCammon's finest book. This is the first book that I read from him, so I cannot say, but this is most certainly a contender. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I'll put it to you that way. Here are the top 10 books that I read in 2019, and it was a great way to finish the decade. Thank you for tuning into this video. I hope all of you have a happy, a healthy, a safe, and a prosperous 2020. And a very prosperous decade indeed. We're going to kick the new year off with going over our best books of all time. My video will be going up on New Year's Day. Jesse's will be going up on the 2nd, and Ari's is going to go up on the 4th because our next discussion is going to be going up on the 3rd. Thank you. Have a very happy New Year, and keep reading.